Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few people get together and we talk about stuff, and sometimes we come up with good ideas, and sometimes we don't. This is one of the good idea times. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. What elements did you guys have?
Wise old man.
I had Wise Old Woman.
I have Villain. Should I go
Ooh.
first?
Yeah, I think so.
Great. Okay. So this is how the villain works. 120 million years ago, a life form, kind of like a mold, was growing up on basically a couple of planets in a system. Where it came from, it's not sure, but clearly it came from another world because it was growing up on a couple of planets, not just one planet. It had done a lot of its development before that, but this is where it really got organized. This is where the entire planet was one huge colony, one huge, fungus colony. And with that sort of giant computing power, the hive mind was created. A couple thousand years went by and something landed on the planet, a ship, and they were consumed. And all of their information and all of their knowledge was sort of retasked and digested. And it began to try and find some way to basically attain the ability to mine and create their own ships and create their own system. Go forward, a couple 100,000 years, and they have gotten the ability to attach themselves to the brain stems of other creatures in order to take them over, right? Go a couple 100,000 more years in the future, and they are a full-fledged colony of people, but what they do is they harvest people and animals and things and basically infect them and then turn them into, think the Borg, think a pathogen that turns everyone alien, whatever, that kind of thing. And their kind of goal is to go out and obviously spread themselves to the universe. After some very brief infighting between the couple different planets in the solar system, quickly one sort of mind took over all of them, and they became like a extremely powerful consciousness. They could cast their control hundreds of thousands of light years away, right? Enough to reach the other end of the galaxy. And so they kind of began this life of going to a planet. If there's any life on it, they would land on the planet, spread the consciousness, which would then seat the power, convert all of the organic matter into things that they needed and could use, and with every new planet and with every new sort of system and with every new sun that was conquered, their mind grew in power and they grew in scope, and they could see farther and go farther and be farther. This went on for, million years, 2 million years, and entire federations were lost trying to find the heart of the beast and cut it out, right? People learned long ago, what they were and how to defeat them, but they just couldn't because, they would just attach themselves to a ship, and even, they would have to do something crazy. The only way to for sure say that a ship wasn't infected was to fly it into the sun, which doesn't really work for the people who were infected. So a couple million years went by, and, this thing had expanded hugely. Probably about a fifth of the total galaxy was under its control, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you think about the scope of the galaxy, it's a lot. We're talking hundreds of millions of worlds. What this consciousness sort of got to and realized was the last sort of fight that it had been a part of, or it had been sort of been conscious of. They had captured the last ship of this fleeing empire, and torn it apart and activated the systems in the machine like it knew how to do, and jettisoned everyone into space, and kept as a trophy the general king of this, the emperor basically, of this civilization. With its vast intellect, this creature had learned how to not just straight take away the mind of the creature, but to use their understanding, to gain their scientific understanding. And that's what he did to this emperor. And what it found was an incredibly competent mind, a mind that understood tactics and understood them in a way that this creature couldn't just copy. And that was its first mistake, is that instead of destroying the mind of the emperor and just using the body and continuing on its ever pursuit, it viewed maybe a higher purpose. Maybe it would preserve some of the mind of this general in order to use its power against its next enemy. Once you're infected with this thing, it destroys all bacteria in your body and it repairs and does the work of so many things. People, who were infected, the bodies would live for, they would stop breeding. They would stop having children, because that wasn't part of this thing, but it could keep a body alive for, 5,000 years or something, if not longer, depending on, what kind of body this person had. But this thing kept this one guy alive. And then it did it to a different place when it found a different general, and then a different place when it found a different general. And soon it was kind of keeping these things alive, and it was in its mind being friends with them, allowing them to rule over the place that they had ruled over before, so that it didn't have to focus on like making people grow food. It could focus on expanding and feeding and all the things that it like felt its urge to do. Well, it took about 2,000 or 3,000 years, but there was another great war, another great federation that no one knows the name of because they were wiped out. We're on the verge of defeat, and all of the generals were sitting in a room together, right? All of them conferring instantly through the sort of pathological connection that they had with this hive mind, as it used their brain strategy, as it used their brains to come up with the perfect strategy, right? Because the people had realized that they started to nuke their worlds and destroy all natural life when they were done with them or when they were running away. And this thing couldn't come and assimilate any of the creatures if they just just destroyed the worlds. And so it had to become more tactical. Anyways, it's a long-winded thing just to say, it was at that moment where the plan that these generals who had once been enemies, they all executed, which they had kept hidden from this hive mind through absolutely laborious caution in how they communicated, using subtle undertones of cultural relevance so completely obscure that there was not a possibility that this hive mind would understand what they were saying. They had spent the last 1,500 years planning a way to destroy this thing, or at least to cripple it, because they had all fought it going back thousands of years. They had all fought it in some way or another and had obviously been effective enough at killing it in order that it would value their intellect. And I don't know exactly what they do, but they do it. They destroy the armada filled with their fleets. They destroy the other armada as well. They activate nuclear fail-safe blasts on all the planets within 200 or 300 light years of where they were. They couldn't go. None of them had been no one had been back to the original solar system in millions of years. So it was kind of a fail-safe effort. And they realized that this wasn't going to defeat him, but what it was going to do was going to basically put him back 100,000 or 200,000 years. And the story picks up 100,000 to 200,000 years later with maybe he comes in on an asteroid, or maybe he comes in on a reconnaissance or something. That's the villain.
Okay, so I have I don't know if Reed wants to go next, but I have a slight idea for a world building thing that would coincide with my wise old woman.
Okay. My wise old man is earthbound, but this is in the far distant future, and Earth was actually one of the, shall we say, seed planets, one of the systems from which intelligent life began spreading across the galaxy.
Okay.
So the wise old man, his name is Pando. And when mankind was first doing just the initial space explorations, sending out unmanned missions to Mars and,
right,
and Voyager was, cruising on out of the solar system. The scientists thought that Pando, at that time, they were speculating it was about 80,000 years old. And at that time, probably the oldest living organism on Earth.
Okay.
Pando is, in modern times, is a grove of poplar trees. Covers about 107 acres, all genetically identical clones sprouting from a massive underground root structure. Been destroyed by floods, been destroyed by fire countless times. The trees above ground, but it just keeps coming back. And Pando doesn't know how old he actually, because he's only been awake. He had been sung awake by the man that he calls the man. There was somebody that he woke up. He became sentient being, and he had a relationship with this guy. But the entire he was wiped out, and all vegetation and all animal life around him, including the man, was wiped out by a flood. And then he came back after the flood, and men began to spread. And poplars are all over. This one, they're native to North Africa and the Middle East and Canada and Europe. And in any case, this one began to hear the thought. He was awake, and he could hear the thoughts of men. So he learned their story as they went through all their different things that they did on Earth, and he had been waiting for someone to hear him. But he was always interested in tales from outside, when the news would spread about missions to other planets and other solar systems and things like that. And one of the things that Pando was very aware of was protecting himself, because there were all kinds of things that had happened over time, periods of pollution, where he had to literally learn to seal off portions of his being to keep from being corrupted, and all this kind of thing. And then as he began to hear like an advanced exploration mission, they were able to get word back, and they weren't going to. The ship wasn't going to come back because they had activated a fail-safe system because they had picked up some kind of parasite, and they realized it was pernicious, and there was no way to avoid corrupting, and so they had to be destroyed, and they activated a fail-safe system to self-destruct. And so there was an awareness of a malevolent force out there on the fringes of what humankind had been able to discover so far. But there was based on and a couple of other lost missions where they didn't hear anything, and disparate enough in space that they realized this was not a small localized problem.
Yeah.
But Pando had begun cogitating on how, what this might be and how to isolate, and, as just his own mechanism for survival.
Okay. So he is the grove of trees.
Yep.
Okay. I thought you were I thought you were saying that he was connected to the grove of trees, but he actually is.
He is the glow. Yeah. And he was sung awake by the man, calls him the man. But the man died in the flood, catastrophic.
People aren't aware that Pando has any kind of consciousness, though, right?
Not yet. He's been waiting for someone to hear him. He's been calling. He's been hearing everything that's been going on.
Right.
And he's been calling, but he hasn't made contact yet.
Right. All right, Seth, you're up.
Okay. So, part of the world building thing, what I think where this planet comes from that the wise old woman is at, is one of those first generals that this parasite had taken over, and they tore the ship apart and jettisoned everybody into space. I'm thinking what happened is there was one of the pods were able to escape with a couple of the, let's say, colonizing families on it. And before they basically pre-jettisoned themselves out, they were able to pull the information off of kind of the ship's main log. And they found themselves on a particular planet. And in the kind of the escape pod, it was kind of like, it would have had all the certain seeds, some of the information of, to start a new civilization out.
Right.
In case something happened, deep in space, things to terraform a world or adjust the atmosphere if needed. And so I'm thinking what happens then is that they come to settle on this kind of uninhabited world. And what they had learned from the log is it was designed to basically, because I think it was something that this general must have put in place to hyper analyze the movements and the actions and the reactions of an enemy that would come aboard the ship. And so it had a pretty good log of this parasite. And what they found was like most, let's say, fungals or things of that nature. They were able to come up with a solution of adjusting different, like either nitrogens or oxygens and stuff in the upper atmosphere that the fungus itself would not be able to come through. Coming through would basically kill off, that fungus.
It could still like send a nuke down, but it couldn't itself come down.
Right. So that's what you've got. You've got this planet here, and because of that, they've been fairly isolated from, the broader, Federation and everything going on. And it's been kind of like the ancient laws was basically to stay planet bound and never to get past like a certain technological advancement. And so for all these, let's say, several thousand years now, this whole society has just kind of had an ebb and flow. Not like they're in the Stone Age, but they're very just kind of, small groups of, towns and villages they build with, the local environment and, stones and timber and, very localized things and communities across this whole thing that have, very little to do with advancing beyond, simple kind of small enclaves of survival, and very connected to just because it was kind of a mentality that they, were not getting anywhere. And so in the kind of the base root of how they started all this, everything was very like satisfied with just staying, let's say, safe in this kind of safe haven. So there's no real drive to reach for the stars or to kind of go beyond, like a pastoral type of life. And on this planet, you have the wise old woman. And I think it's, kind of a concessive, like pass on from one to the next. And sometimes it's a wise old woman. Sometimes it's an old, whatever. They take on an apprentice and they kind of teach him the ways. And most people see him as kind of like this medicine man or medicine woman. They always have, herbs, and they just seem to know everything. And it's like most people avoid them, but sometimes he or she, in this case, she will, go visit like a king or a head of a village or area and kind of give them some different instructions and then kind of recluse back to her, kind of deep mountain forest kind of cottage. And the secret with her is that inside her cottage, which is kind of on the backside of this cliff, and it's like half built in stone with, the thatch or kind of like the stone tiled roof, and it's half of it's kind of a timber frame with the stucco in it. And it's just kind of in that little, fanciful glen, kind of like some fairy tale little witch's house in the middle of the enchanted forest kind of look. And basically, so if anyone would go and talk to her, like a lot of people would go seek her out for her wisdom, and how to, when to plant, what to plant, it's stuff like this. And what it is that this whole line of people that have taken this role, they hold the secret that inside this cottage is a secret room that goes back into a cave where there's like a, like in Star Trek, beam me up, Scotty, there's like a teleportal chamber that will bring them up into the mid-atmosphere or upper atmosphere where the old
ship is,
which is ultimately because this planet didn't have a moon. And so what it's done is it's designed and it's built itself out to act as the moon, to control the tides. And it's really like the upper satellite that's controlling the terraforming of the world and checking the balance of the things in the upper atmosphere. And that's kind of their job in this is all the log of everything that's on the planet, what it does. It's just kind of logging everything and seeing how different things are evolving. And that's why then she'll go and, she's got all the information on everything and, what kind of vitamins and the mixtures and all the things. And so they kind of keep tabs on that. And then, so like if it's saying that like the parts of the atmosphere are being depleted of a certain thing, it'll be like, okay, you need to plant more juniper trees. I don't know. Because it'll pull these things out and emit this, chemical. You need to pressure people into, not, I don't know, fishing krill anymore for, 100 years or whatever it is. Little things like this that are always, tweaking all the gases and the way that the levels of all that are in the atmosphere. Because what that does is keeps a tight control over keeping this fungus off the planet.
Is the fungus like actively attacking, or had they just tried a few times and then realized it was inhospitable and kind of left them alone for a while? What is the status here?
My thought was that this great upheaval happened millions of years ago, right? This is a thing that happened just millions of years ago, and people are now, so the fungus has been, it never reattached, it's never allowed a person to keep any of their intellect ever again, but it also basically erased human life, ships, creatures from its space. It made like an error of committing all of its forces to this armada, giving all of the power to these generals, and then so it's kind of been bound a little bit. And it's only in the more recent age where humans from Earth have been sending out missions that now all of a sudden, that one ship you said goes, they, do a failsafe and sacrifice the ship and all the crew because something happened. They're like just now starting to get whispers of something out in the dark of space. And that's the reason why humans haven't found any intelligent life in the galaxy, right? That's the reason why, is because there was intelligent life. There was worlds and federations and people and trade, but they've all been stripped away and destroyed, And so I have the idea kind of that maybe with the intelligent life that they have met, humans have met, they have like this kind of terrifying fear, and they aren't 100% sure why. It's just something passed down, that's just afraid of that area of space. And human beings are kind of like, boldly go where no man has gone before.
Yeah.
It's like everyone else in some way has experienced this before they evolved into the place that they could have conscious thought, except for humans. And so we're just like, we're going to go and conquer it, whatever it is. No hole too deep, no mountain too high,
I just heard a video of somebody was an interview, a scientist. He said, it wouldn't take much of a look at human history to realize that if we should find intelligent life out there, that it might not be somebody we would want to meet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I have the kind of vision now that humans have spread obviously to the solar system, but like a couple of solar systems, there's a couple 100 trillion humans.
Yeah. Yeah. And probably haven't figured out any kind of fancy,
there's no
folding
FTL.
space, no faster than light, but has been, like there was the movie Passengers where they had these, hundreds of years they would send and people in cryo sleep, and they would, they had, the process was beginning.
Yeah. Or like in the Ender series where you would basically, you'd get up to like 100 mil, not in any way close to the speed of light, but you would spend 6 months, 6 months to a year accelerating, and then 10 months deaccelerating. And to you, 4 months had passed, but to everyone else, 15 or 20 years had passed, and you were able to sort of traverse. So no faster than light, no gates, no warp drive, no hyperdrive, nothing like that. But, we have like the Ansible, quantum computing, not quantum computing, but quantum communication, so that we can communicate instantly across the universe. We have stuff like that, using like subspace and stuff like that to communicate.
The Ansible, I hadn't used that. That was from Ender's Game.
Yep.
That was their way of communicating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so I imagine it's a big beast. It's a big federation. It's a big thing, but they do move slowly because they don't have any faster than light. And I think the story really starts with the ship of some sort falling to the planet where the wise old woman is. I think that is probably like a good place for part of the story to start,
Yeah.
Or maybe part of the story also starts where someone finally hears, what's his name?
Pando. That's the name that's been given to this organism that's 80,000, they calculate is 80,000 years old.
Right.
But
right. You could have someone listening to subspace vibrations, or however it is that Pando communicates, as a consciousness. But I like this story. Should we make this a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 parter?
Oh, this could go on. This has got lots of potential. We got to do more about this.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode, the first part of many of Wait It Gets Better, the space episodes. We sure do like space, episode 1. I have been Levi. If you liked these episodes, if you liked the podcast, let us know. Give us a message on waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com or send us a Twitter at @getsbettercast, or don't, and just keep watching the episodes, because every time I see someone has watched it, and I know I've only told like 10 people, so if more than 10 people watch it, then I know that someone out there who I don't know is watching it, and that makes me happy. Tune in next week for the next episode. Thanks so much. Bye.